Today I'd like to talk to you about something very dear to my heart. Something very dear to my heart. What is that? Well, chess is, of course, and also other things are too. Chess doesn't only get the look in my life. I'm thinking, who's that? Anyway, I played one game and one game only. I'm just going to pull this down a little bit because I'm just going to do my housekeeping while you watch this video. Hopefully you enjoy this video. The other day I brought to you a position that Nigel Short played and was the exponent of in the 1980s, in the French Tarrasch. And so today I bring you another variation, not of the Tarrasch this time, but of the Queen's Indian opening. The Queen's Indian opening is before you now, and this is the starting position where white is to move on their fourth move. Their fourth move, which just reminds me of, I'm not allowed to say the word Holland because Holland is only part of the Netherlands. But when I was younger, my parents would say Hollandse praten, which means speaking in Dutch or in Holland language. And so, but I'm allowed to say Nederlandse praten, which means Netherlands speaking as if I'm from the Netherlands. But anyway, I'm here for chess, aren't I? That's right, I'm here for chess. I'm wondering why my video image, which isn't important of course, but I'm still wondering why it's looking sort of overexposed since I've moved the camera up. So if you please excuse me, I'm just going to move it up a little bit more, and don't think that makes any difference. And so I'll move the camera closer to me. Oh no, we're not doing that. It might be actually focusing in on the background and overexposing or something. So I'm in the lounge here in Dunedin, and I bring you this one game and one game only. And this is the only game I played today, but there's a marathon on, a bullet marathon. I don't, like 24 hours of 1 minute chess, bullet chess. I mean, I might play a few games, but like, would I want to play 24 hours? No, I can't play 24 hours. Anyway, and my friend last night, or should I say this morning, maybe about 2 a.m. It's bad, isn't it? But it was earlier. We were watching one of the chess videos on here, and he is former detective of police in New Zealand. I can't give his name, of course. He was former detective of New Zealand police, and we were watching the video, and I had the wrong shirt on because the detail of a police officer is he just pointed, he saw the video was done the other day, a few days ago, or maybe 2 days ago, 1 day ago. He pointed to my shirt, and I knew what he was saying. He was saying, "Oh, you're still wearing the same shirt." Anyway, the Queen's Indian. So this is a bit like Nigel Short the other day, the position that I showed where he plays, and I didn't get to show very much of it. So I'd like to still maybe touch on that at a later date. But so I'm talking about the Queen's Indian opening. Now, if I look at this position here, okay, this is the important square here, okay, E4 in the Queen's Indian. This is the most important square on the board in the Queen's Indian. That's why black often tries to evade capture of their knight f6, and my opponent in this 5-minute game, who's now coming 12th, is 2174, or he finished 12th, I think, is 2174 for 5-minute chess on leechess.org. So I actually have a little bit of luck in this, and I want to talk about luck. I have a little bit of luck in this, but this square E4 is very important, as I have an old book. It's probably about another 30 years older than I, or another 20. Oh, it's probably only 1 year older, because it's a very, very old book. And so I've got this book, and it's The Queen's Indian by Koenig, or so. That's how I say it, K-O-N-I-Q, I think. But I haven't got it with me, and the front paperback part of the outer cover is coming off a little. So I want to talk to you about The Queen's Indian, but I also want to talk to you about my friend, who is my Christian friend, and anyone that knows me knows that I say that I'm trying to be a Christian. And what does that mean anyway? But that's not what I'm talking about. But he says to me, we have this discussion or debate or argument, maybe. I don't know if it's an argument, but we have this discussion about whether there's such a thing as luck. Because he holds to that there is no such thing as luck. But I say, well, if I throw this die or this dice, or if I have, I don't play lotto, but if the balls fall in a certain way, someone can win. Is that luck? Or is it, is it lady luck that shines on that person? Probably. I mean, I think that there are things that are random. There's, not everything is not a coincidence, if you get what I mean. And I read in I think it was it William Hartston, who says that or something like that, or Chess for Tigers, fortune favours the lucky. Fortune favours the lucky. So is there such a thing as luck? Probably. I mean, it is a word in the dictionary, isn't it? So anyway, I'm going to get on with the chess game soon. But I have a little bit of what I would call a bit of luck on my side in this game. Because had I not had luck, I would have lost this game. But I might still have placed it on here because it has a few ideas in my play for how to play the Queen's Indian for black from the book. Namely that of Queen C8 that I play somewhere along the line. So I'm just having a look at the other thing that I really like is, well, I mean, it's not the only thing I really like, but the one thing I really like is that we reach an opposite coloured bishop endgame. I have fond memories of opposite coloured bishop endgames, and so this game came about that after my luck, I had my opponent and I in with different opposing coloured squares of the board, bishops only, and king and pawns. And so that's why I like this game. It's got a bit of luck, like Paul McCartney would say, a little bit of luck. It's got a little bit of opening ideas for you that I hope you can draw on and use in your game. I got, by the way, 107th, because I only played one game, but that's not bad, is it? 107th. 107th, what? That's not bad, is it? And this is called the from position. I'm wondering, what's that from position mean? This is my game and my opponent's game. What's this mean from position? My opponent lost 13 points. That means the from position. The from position is the Queen's Indian Defence Blitz Arena. So this is the starting position, and we're playing from this position. So I'm just wanting to do my housework. I have fond memories of opposite colour bishop endgames, and especially the way that people just give up when it's a drawn position in their eyes. It's a drawn position, but that cannot be further from the truth in some cases, or in a lot of cases. One only has to look at Mikhail Botvinnik to glean other information about opposite colour bishop endgames. And so, but I have fond memories, and the one I will not go into more detail than is at the Canterbury Chess Club. Two A graders were playing, and they had opposite colour bishop endgame. A friend was black and a friend was white, and after the game was finished this time, because in the old days I wouldn't do this, when the game was finished, I said to the player who was playing black, "Oh, why don't you play this and this and this? And then I think you've got a one game." He was quite surprised. And the other one was, I had a bishop, I was white. It was 2007 where I got third equal in a strong tournament. I beat the international master from Wellington in New Zealand. I beat the international master, and what had happened was I had earlier played a game where we had opposite colour bishop endgame, and I moved my king as white from sort of G1 right up to C8 and D8, and then to E7, and came back towards the pawns or the kings or something like that. So anyway, without further ado, I'm just going to check one more time. Let's get into this. So I've talked about luck and all that sort of stuff. With a little luck. So here we go with the first moves that were played on move 4, G3 and bishop B7. So this is coming up for quite a normal sort of Queen's Indian thus far. So here I play D6. I could play D5. I could play C6. I could play Knight E4. All these sorts of moves. And one has to remember that the Queen's Indian is good for white if they know the Garry Kasparov line, which is an early D5 and an A3 and all those sorts of things, I think. And where Ulf Andersson, the Grandmaster from Sweden, was heard saying, "I'll never play Garry Kasparov again." But they did play again later on. D6. Of course, we all know that Garry is the best chess player ever to grace this planet. So notice that white knows that the E4 square is important here, as Queen C2 is now eyeing up the E4 square, where neither player has real control than maybe white, because white's probably going to play E4 soon. Knight BD7. Now this is all about the square E4, because now I have a support for my Knight F6 by playing Knight BD7. And here comes Bishop G5. Excuse me. No, it's not. And I played H6. Thereby, my opponent gives me my dark squared bishop. And now, if we exchange the white squared bishop off, then there's no such thing as an opposite coloured bishop endgame. Here my opponent played E4. So now I have to do something about these pawns. Do I play back to D7 with my knight, and then look to playing E5 and F5, E5 and F5? Do I look to do that or something else? I don't know if this is the correct move, but I feel it kind of transposes to maybe, well, it's still the Queen's Indian structure, but it almost goes into a Maroczy-bind sort of Sicilian defence with c5. Rook fd1, and I want to get rid of the stronghold of white's central pawn mass. So I play cd4 and knight d4. Now comes the thematic move from the book, which is queen c8 on move 13, or move 9. Is it move 9? Because we started at the from position. And now if knight db5, then I intend to play rook d8, or even knight e8. But I'm still wanting to look at e4 square. But at the moment, black is, of course, threatening queen c8, takes c4, maybe, maybe not. So here's b3, and now I play a sort of a substitute Sicilian defense move with a6. And I might be able to play b5, and it might be a little bit crazy. f4. So this opens up the diagonal. So guess what I do? I cavort my knight to g4, or leap my knight into g4. Leaping Dave is what I was called one day by one of our New Zealand journalists. Leaping Dave. That was for my 21st birthday. Queen, knight g4 and queen d2, guarding the important e3 square. So I now play bishop f6. So this is almost where I lose my bishop, my dark squared bishop. And now comes h3. What do I do? Oh no, I've lost my piece. Oh no, what do I do now? I've lost my piece. I haven't actually lost my piece anyway, but I'm going to lose a pawn sort of thing. Because after bishop d4, queen d4, I've got knight f6. I've just seen that. But I didn't play bishop d4 check because I end up with a dark squared bishop against a white squared bishop. So what I did now is a little bit different, and it probably helps to have it probably helps for me to have done some puzzles. I played queen c5 with the idea of e5. So hg4, I'm now losing. It's now a lost game. I played e5, and maybe g5 is a possibility here. But I think that I'd be okay. I'd end up with a bit of mucked up pawns and all that sort of thing. And I ended up with 34 seconds in this 5-minute game, and my opponent 54. Knight a4. Oh, that's a bit different. That's a bit ouch. So I have to play queen d4, check. Queen d4, e d4. Now this pawn is lost now on b6. Excuse me. I play rook a d8, just looking after my d6 pawn, as that's probably going to get attacked soon too. Here comes knight d5, and I sit there and go, well, what am I going to do now? I've got really a little bit of hope only, but only hope is I've got a little bit of hope. A little bit of hope, no luck at the moment, because I'm clearly losing this position. My opponent has outplayed me thus far, even though I own a book on the Queen's Indian defence, which is why I played in this. And it's also good for versatility to play openings that I haven't been really playing. I've been a little bit lax there. But I have this pawn on d4, so I see this pawn as, because white hasn't got a dark squared bishop, I see this pawn as a possibility for me maybe to get a piece on c3 or e3 depending on what black is met by after bishop d5 on move 22, e5. So now I have a place for my rook on e3, a hotel square on e3. I play rook fe8, rook d2. So of course I plant my rook into e3 because it just looks good there, doesn't it? Does it look good? I think it does. So I played rook e3 and I'm on my hotel square. This is my hotel square e3. It's one of my favourite things that I've made up, and some New Zealand chess champions, one in particular, a doctor, really likes that idea of calling the square on e3 a hotel square on e3. King f2, rook de8. Now I have the only open file for my rook and my other rook with the hotel on e3, if I haven't mentioned that already. So we have compensation, Your Honour. We have compensation. And so I have ideas of going rook c3 and rook 8 to e3 and rook takes g3, etc. And there's no capture on e3 by an opposing rook on e1 because of de3 forking the king and the rook on d2 with check. So here's rook a d1. So I feel I have compensation at least. White could capture the d4 pawn, but then I think my rooks will be quite strong on the open e-file, at least one of them. Rook c3, and we have bishop f3. Now, this is a bit sad because it invites the following move, rook e3. So now I have my compensation is turning into better than compensation. I'm going to get sort of kind of equality after bishop moves because it's the only thing for it. Bishop g2, I have rook g3 and g5. Now, do I take the money and run? Yes, of course I do. hg5, fg5 and rook g5, so that if rook d4, then bishop d4 check and rook c2 check wins the bishop on c2. The game would be then over according to my opponent too as well, I think. Rook d3. So I play, instead of rook d3, I play rook f5, king g1, and now I play rook g5. I'm being a little bit, I don't know what I'm doing here. King h1, bishop e5. Now I feel that this bishop is a little bit better than white's bishop. Even though we have pawns on the d4 and d5 respectively squares, or the d5 and d4 respectively, my pawn is of course passed on d4, and if white ever captures the rook on c3, then that will be great advantage. And please see again that if rook takes pawn on d4, bishop d4, rook d4, and rook c1 is final again, check, as after king h2, what else? Rook c2 now wins the bishop on g2 again, as it cannot be defended adequately. Or can it? Can it be defended adequately? I think it can actually, by rook g3 actually, David. But anyway, that's rook g3, king g3, rook a2, and the game's over. Now came bishop f3. So I play rook c2, and here's white is dribbling around with the ball. So I play rook c3, rook d3, and now I played king f8. Sort of just going to move my king in. Bishop g2, I'm waiting for the blunder. Rook h5, has it occurred yet? King g1, rook c2. My opponent will be probably quite happy with the draw, so I think, well, I think I can play this on. Rook d2, rook d2. I can't sit here too long. Now it's your move. What would you play now? This re-establishes something, so it's very easy to see. It is, of course, bishop f4. Rook d4 is not really possible because bishop e3 is game over. Check. I play bishop e3 check anyway, and we have king f1, and now I have rook f5 check, king e1, rook f2. Now, I think I actually, I don't know if I dropped the ball, but I don't think I played perfectly, whatever that means. Rook a2, b4. Now, white has compensation, this time instead of me, with their majority on the queen side, which can present themselves rather dangerously to my game for black. I played rook b2, and here my opponent played what I consider to be quite a good move given the circumstances. Played c5, rook b4, c6, rook c4, bishop f5. This is not looking terribly good. I have to be very, very careful of the moves I play, and guess what? I wasn't. g6, and we have bishop d7, king e7. This looks like it's doing okay, but I'm not sure that it is. King e2, f5, the best move on the planet on move 52. It's taken me that long to play it. King f3, and now I play a blunder, g5. And my opponent doesn't set, so this is a little bit of luck, but this isn't what I'm saying was my actual real luck. So g5, rook a3, and I thought, oh no, my pawn. f4, a la Eric Rosen, and f4, rook a6, and rook c5. Ouch. Now my opponent plays merely rook a7, and what do I do? What should I do? What do you think I should do now for black? This is going to be my main session for the week. What do you think I should do for black now? I played probably a blunder. I played the move, I hope you played better than me, rook d5. Now, because I knew that the bishop, wherever it goes, is not going to really bother me, but I'm not sure. Bishop g4, king e8, c7. Oh no, I'm going to lose this. So what I do is rook c5, and you won this? Queen c8, rook c8, bishop c8. Now what was my move? What would you play now? Resign? Yeah, probably you should resign here. Remember, my opponent got 12th. I played d3. What am I doing? I'm attacking. The bishop's attacking. Not I'm attacking. My bishop on e3 is attacking the pawn or the rook on a7. And now, here is the luck I was talking about earlier on in this video about 15 hours ago. My opponent played bishop g4. Okay, so it snuffle. And now we have my favourite endgame, or one of them. I quite like queen and pawn endgames. I kind of like king and pawn endgames. And I don't mind rook and pawn endgames either. King e4, d2, we're going to march the pawn, it's hopefully going to march. I'll sacrifice my king on d7 with bishop takes king, and then I'll go queen, not, bishop e3, king e4, king e7. Now we have probably a draw. King d5, bishop c5, frees up the king on e7, king e4, king f6, king d3, trading places, bishop b4 now. And we have king to e4, preventing my moving my king to e5. I'd like to go to e5 so I can play d5 soon. Bishop c5, a weighty move, king d3. Now I get to play king e5. I don't think, yeah, I don't know. I'm not really going to look into this too much, but I think maybe white can play a little bit better than king d3, but maybe not. King e5, now I have the pawn can start marching on d6. But hang on a second, you've just seen it, haven't you? King d2. d5. d5, we have to do this. Sometimes we have to do this. But how do I progress from here? Maybe actually here is better as king f3. But then after king e2, d5, bishop f3 check. It's not entirely perfect, but these pawns, there's 3 pawns for black and none for white. So all I have to do is something. d5 or nothing. d5, king d3, bishop e3, and now we have d4. This looks a bit odd because it just looks like white can now blockade. King d3, king d5, bishop e3, like white is doing. And probably that's correct. I don't think that white has to panic about anything except for panic itself. Now, so it's your move now. What would you play now? Because obviously we're at a standstill here. I can't progress any further, really. Or can I? So what do I do now? King d5, my opponent will probably offer me a draw. So here I played f3. And this is now relinquishing my other pawn, which seems a bit silly, really, because I'm giving away pawns, not swapping pieces off. We can't swap the pieces off unless one attacks the other with the king, or pawn for me in that case. But white can't do the same. King f4. Now I have a pawn, g5, with marching orders, but my f5 pawn is gone. That's a bit sad. Bishop d1. I'm a wee bit talky today. Hope that's okay. I like to explain what's going on a little bit. g4, I think that's what people like. I'm not sure yet. King g3, king f1, and now it's easy to see d3. Now both my pawns are on squares where the bishop can take them on, but I've got to be careful that the bishop can't. Bishop a4, now I just have king h2. One of these pawns is going to win, isn't it? So I'm just going to show you the end. And here we've got king e2, and I was a little bit greedy here. I can go g2, and it's like a protected passed pawn on d2 with the bishop on e3. I played bishop f4, being extra careful because I wanted to make sure that I've got a game to go to YouTube. Thank you again, YouTube, and thank you as well for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get something out of it, even if it's just advice about opposite coloured bishop endgames or luck. Now, the next move is very easy to see, as it threatens check or it threatens queen, is either d1 check with queen or g2 is as good as each other. I played g2 in this case. King e2 was played, so my opponent's just wriggling a wee bit. I played g1, and that is where my opponent resigned, which is what I consider to be quite a reasonable game. Black is threatening a number of things without going into detail. I won't bore you with that. I thank you very much for watching, and I wish you all the best with your chess, and I bid you farewell from here to Dunedin, New Zealand, and bye for now. Okay, thank you. Cheers.